So I'm looking at adaptation finance and how that's going to play out in terms of whether it's going to be enough, is it going to be adequate, is it going to be effective, and looking at some case study countries as well.
Right, and presumably applying some of what you're studying, some of that PhD work to your negotiations on behalf of the youth delegation here. What specifically have you been focusing on in the work with the youth delegations?
Well, I think one of the big issues is that the EU's targets are incredibly weak compared to what is absolutely necessary for the science, and the EU is not stepping up to the plate. They've only got a target of 20% by 2020, but they've already actually reached an 18% reduction. So their effective target is to do nothing for the next 8 years, and it's completely insufficient. They've got the historical responsibility for emissions, and the science actually says we're now heading towards a 4-degree world, which is extremely catastrophic for young people in the next generation.
Although the EU, I know, are saying that they're at the forefront of the negotiations, they have done more than anybody else. The fact that they have reduced their emissions, or on target to reduce them by 18%, but there is scope for more, you're saying?
Well, part of those reductions were actually carbon offsets, and the integrity of some of those offsets can also be questioned in many ways. So it's not really a domestic reduction, they're just trying to pass the buck. They're not accepting historical responsibility, and it's completely inadequate when we consider that the EU should be really at the lead of this negotiations, and they're claiming to be.
I mean, have they been listening, as far as you're aware, in your campaigning and the people you've spoken to, the youth delegations are speaking to? Do you get the impression they're listening, or are they just become very adept at passing the buck?
Yeah, it's really difficult to get the message across, and I'm not sure whether there's probably not enough communication really between the scientists that are saying this is what we need and the politicians on the other hand who have got their own negotiations game going on, and they're just really playing politics with the planet. It's completely insufficient.
I mean, what can you do on the campaigning front? What more, as you said, the message isn't getting across, the communication's not where it should be. I mean, there's a lot of work going on, especially among the various youth delegations here, to kind of push the politicians to get that message home. I mean, what more can be done? I mean, the scientists are telling us one thing, you know, the message is getting home to the rest of the world. It seems as though in some ways the only people not taking heed of the message are the politicians. How do we change that? How do we make that better?
Well, we're trying to actually send petitions. Young people today have been campaigning and protesting in Doha as well, and there's the Push Europe campaign, which was supposed to try and push Europe to actually step up to what they need on the leadership on climate change. But the problem is there's a lot of lobbying from the other side. There's corporate lobbyists who, different parties, obviously there's different countries within the EU, and some of them don't want to reduce emissions at all, and they're claiming because of the recession that they're not going to put forward the finance. So at the moment we also have a massive gap between now and 2020 until the finance actually comes through for mitigation or adaptation to climate change. So at the moment there's nothing on the table until 2020 for finance, and by then it may already be too late for the planet. We know that there's certain climatic tipping points in the climate system, and I just don't think there's enough awareness.